even how sometimes people get like stereotypes for other people, and that's wrong. But then I don't know, I thought that will be too cliche or something like that.
Is there a problem that you can point to specifically? Like, I mean, if it's in sports, if it's in a specific business even, are there businesses that will like only hire their race? Or you want to find something that you can really like pinpoint because you're already working with ideas of ideology. So you want to have something physically tangible that you can point to and find evidence on. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard. But let's work through it. You wanted to do something with racism, possibly. Anyone else have ideas on what you guys wanted to do?
My interest was for the dog breeding, but I could like listen to get ideas.
Well, what were your first ideas of things that just would need to come up even? Basic things that you need to cover. What is it about dog breeding that you think is wrong? Did you say dogs or pets?
I think dogs in general, but I was thinking because there's so many already, like in the shelters that are being killed all the time, that there's not really a need for dog breeding. I think it's greedy.
Okay, so you're already pointing to greed behind it. But there's also two, so there's the seller, this person who's trying to make money, and then there's also, I mean, it's an industry because there are people who want it. So is there something on the other end? Is there a way that you can make it a unified argument where you're talking about both ends of what's going on? Because you've got a person they're just trying to make money, or that's the argument that they'd make, right? And then there's the cost that you're already seeing, that the animals are clearly suffering. Has anyone even seen a shelter? Like the shelters that we have, you'll see stuff on Instagram where there's like people who are like adopting out. They find these animals and they take care of them and then they give them out to like celebrities or people who want them or something. But if you go to the places that they go to get these animals, like San Bernardino's animal shelter, it's freaking ruthless. So there's people who will volunteer, take time out to like go and help. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people who are in administrative roles and people who are callous because they've been in it for so long and they're just thinking about it as a job. I don't know how far it goes in their minds with how lowly they look at animals in their shelters, but the way that they treat them is freaking like scummy. It's detestable. But you want a focused essay and you want to be able to like pinpoint stuff that you can actually quantify in a way, right? When we're talking about greed, well, you can see, because it should be obvious with the result. Like you can make a pretty clear connection to greed, even though that's something where like, how can you understand what's going on in someone's mind? Well, you can see the outcome of what they do regardless of the situation that pretty much everyone is aware of. So there's that factor.
Yeah. So when you say that you want like a unified argument, so for like the buyers side, you mean like what could I argue, like why they should buy from shelters?
Yeah, probably. Okay, so there's an industry that's not going to stop if it's still got buyers. Like the industry will meet the buyer demand. If they see that people are just really into these kind of dogs, they're trying their best to make as much money as they can, and so they'll keep pumping out dogs. If there's a higher demand, then they'll start finding ways to breed more dogs. And if already the conditions that they're doing it in right now are unacceptable, you can imagine what it gets to when you see like raids on places and like all these dogs in these crazy conditions are found, and you're like, well, what the heck? How is this going on under our noses? It's like, they've been in business for 50 years. What are you talking about? But thinking about it from the buyer's perspective too, because there's enough guilt to go around. It's not about like trying to pass the blame on one side of it. It's like, no. The guilt, it multiplies, right? Everyone can be guilty here. So like when people buy, they know that they could get a dog somewhere else. Maybe you could say something about, well, people need to be informed, but there's a lot of people who they're informed and it's just, they really wanted that cool looking dog. And they tried the shelter. They went over there one time. It was gross. And they had an adoption fee of like $200 or something, which pays for a lot of the shots and spay and neuter or whatever. There's things like that. There's also ways where those places will make it more difficult than it should probably be to adopt. Or we have a friend and she just got a retriever and she wanted to get one from a shelter, and she did a lot of research and she drove all the way to like Apple Valley, and then they're like, oh yeah, we had a conflict where we double booked people to see the same dog, and so those people got the dog. She drove like 2.5 hours to see this dog, and then she got like held up there and they were like mean and stuff, and then I don't know, she ended up just going and buying from a breeder, you know? So like it sucks, but it's hard to like then get mad at someone who she did take a lot of time. It was like months, and somehow it fell through. Oh, their adoption fee was going to be $1,000 too. What the hell is that? Like, that's freaking ridiculous. And so like you can find breeds that you want. Like there are like rescues for pit bulls, rescues for huskies, if you wanted to like really go that route and make sure that you had this exact breed. But you got to think there's also the factor behind what do you do with a dog after? Because a lot of people who get a dog, if it's too much for them, they liked the idea of owning the dog, but they didn't realize how much work was behind it. And what's the ideology in our culture there, where if something's too difficult, then we can just give up on it. And so long as you put it out of your sight or pass it off some way, you can kind of justify or make yourself feel better about it, like it's an acceptable thing to do. So maybe passing the dog off to someone else who you don't necessarily think, you haven't really thought about if they're going to be a good owner or whatever, or just keeping your dog in the backyard and they paw at things, and every once in a while they get out your gate and they maul another dog or they bite a human, and then they eventually have to get put down. I have neighbors across the street and they've got like a German Shepherd, and it only has like half of a yard, and it pretty much just barks its head off at everyone who passes by. Is the dog bad, or is it that they don't ever walk their dog, and it's a huge freaking dog, and like how's it going to get stimulus, and it probably just wants love. But yes, a couple times it got out and bit people and somehow hasn't been put down yet. But is that even the dog's fault, right? Like, who does the responsibility fall on? Is it a bad dog now? I mean, it could be technically considered, depending on your criteria, a bad dog now that can't be trained any better, but how did it get that way? And who should all of that lay on? Are there kinds of things that we need to do? So this isn't so much of a policy as much of an argument of ideology here, but you can touch on things like, hey, if we can't change our mindset of this to this, then this is the kind of thing we'd have to do, which is like, what would that be? And does that sound ridiculous? Because if it is ridiculous, then that in and of itself would be an argument towards what you're saying. You're like, it's either this or this ridiculous thing that we should not have to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Could I also say how dogs are treated kind of like objects?
Yeah. So what's an ideology that's behind that? You could talk about a couple things. Like, sure, there's greed, but there's also, how do we look at animals? Is there something in us that makes us feel like we have the right to treat them just like a toy, as an object that doesn't have emotions or feelings of any kind? Is it because their feelings and emotions are at a lower level than ours because they don't have the brain that we have, that somehow also could justify things? When you're making these arguments, you're trying to make them towards the kind of people who are on the side that you're not happy with. So you want to make it in a way where you're not insulting them, but you're also trying to like walk them through this to make them agree with you, to understand the thing that you have realized. See how that gets a little bit, it gets difficult. Obviously, you want to say things as objectively as you can. I think I've said this before, but the power in pathos, in using pathos, the emotional appeal, is not in you getting emotional, but in saying things that cause the reader to get emotional in a way that is effective for your argument, for what you want. Like you evoking compassion in them. But rarely is compassion evoked when someone's just like screaming at the top of their lungs, which can sound like it's coming across in a paper.
Yeah, when you put it like that, walking them through the argument, it kind of makes it easier to understand.
Right. And then you can think about the steps that you need for that. Like, okay, imagine you could even talk to someone if you know someone, like totally get in a conversation with them. Here's a pro tip for you. Audio record the conversation. It's not like you're gonna like say who they are, but you might be able to get a little bit of like opposing viewpoint from them, like things that might come up that you're like, oh yeah, that is a common thing, and I totally forgot that that's something that someone like them would say. Or in your process of trying to talk to them about the idea, and you can just be asking them questions along the way. It could help, right? Maybe you have a sibling that disagrees with you, or a friend from school that you remember talking to, or someone you know even through social media who takes pictures of their Belgian Malinois all the time and they're really into their dog. You might want to ask them what they think. Hey, I'm writing an essay on breeding pets and what mentalities can be found behind. Just tell them what you're writing on and act like it's just assigned by your professor. And then you can possibly get some pretty good insight into the other side. Or you can just go on like Quora or one of those forums where people argue and bicker about that stuff. It doesn't mean you quote it, right? You're just getting opposing viewpoints or even direction for the kinds of things you have to like, whoa, I really have to do a lot to get through this person's head kind of thing. Because I mean, when we talk about it right now, Nicole, it seems like we're pretty much on the same page about this kind of stuff. But for someone who's not on the same page, which is the kind of person that you actually would want to read your essay, not like they will, but imagine they will, then you'd have to walk through a couple more things, which would give you a longer essay. So that's good. It doesn't mean make points that are totally unnecessary to make, but it does mean like there are some key steps to like building that argument and making sure that someone else can agree with you on it. Any other aspects to that one? What's the mentality, at least on the buyer's side? It's not greed.
Well, they just kind of want like a cool dog.
What is that? Yeah, they want a cool dog. What if it's a guy who wants a husky? We brought that up, I think, before. Here, better yet. The guy works out a lot and he's talking to your wife who works with wolves. My wife, she works with wolves. She hasn't done it in a while because obviously people don't do events anymore, but it's like ambassador wolves where they take them around and they educate people. And the biggest question they ever get is, hey, where do I get one of those? Where do I get a wolf? And the thing is that they're like, you don't want a wolf. You don't want a wolf. First of all, okay, they're like $5,000 to $10,000 just to buy. Second, you need licensing. Third, they only eat raw meat. Like you're not supposed to give them kibble. They don't have the enzymes to digest it, or you're not supposed to. You need 12-foot high fences to keep them around the whole perimeter of your property. Whatever space you have them in. There's all kinds of things you have. There's insurance that you need for liability. It's crazy. And you need to actually have it like a nonprofit. You can't just be like some rich person who's like, I want a wolf. But that's the thing. People just want wolves. Why do they want wolves?
To say that they have a wolf, but not to actually care for it, I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, what would be caring for a wolf? That would be like wolves travel like 20 miles a day just looking for food. They can eat like 30 pounds of meat in one sitting. They could do like all kinds of crazy stuff. They also have like insanely strong jaws because they crush bones like for a living. So like if they bite you, like it doesn't matter if your dog is bigger than a wolf, their jaw would just, and so there's that kind of liability too. All the kids will come out and they're like, they want to pet the wolf. They'll yell in the wolf's face and you're like, oh God, these animals, these ones are kind of trained in a way. They're trained to handle, okay, they don't bite, but like they could at any point. You can't really trust that animal to be able to like not bite a kid. So you like the idea of the animal. You think they're cool. Maybe you read some dumb fantasy books where like someone has some like relationship with a wolf and it imbues to them superpowers and bullshit, or something cool about like, well, wolves are wild and powerful beasts, and I'm a wild and powerful beast, babe. I don't know. Do they think it'll help them pull chicks? Do they think it'll help them look masculine? The next best thing to a wolf is probably a husky or a German shepherd. Those are the closest looking. A Malamute, a bigger version of a husky. Oh, by the way, with wolves, they fear poop, meaning they just uncontrollably, if you scare them in any way, they will just poop, like release. You can't potty train animals like that too either. So they're just like pooping in your car, pooping in the house if you let them in the house, all kinds of fun stuff. Does that sound cool?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, so the idea, like, well, what is it a machismo thing? What is it that makes people want to have a big dog with nuts? My dog can beat up your dog kind of thing. Is that it? A lot of hipster people want wolves too. And typically when I think of hipsters, I think of guys with like skinny arms and big guts because they're foodies and they drink IPAs every night. So it's a lot of calories. Oh, they got a big beard though to match their gut. Anyway, think about if you're going over something like breeding pets, there's obviously two ideologies going on there. There's the seller, but then there's also a different aspect for the buyer. And so you probably need to go over both, or you could just focus on one element depending on what you get for your essay, but I'd be okay with you going over both. So it's like two large components, but there's like intricate points along the way where you could weave that into a unified argument. What else we got?
Hi, I want to write about why we shouldn't eat meat. So can I just use my thesis statements as basically as my arguments? Because on the instruction said you want us to think about why it is broken before we try to find a solution to the problem. But can I use my thesis statements as why it is broken? You know.
Totally. Well, you're saying, yeah, what's broken and why it's broken.
Yeah, right. Because I'm gonna talk about why we shouldn't eat meat. It's because first of all from an ethical standpoint, and also it's because we love animals. So we don't think about them when we eat them. So. And also, it's a contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. Like global warming, yeah, it definitely is responsible for a certain percentage, And I'm also trying to think about like a third perspective,
So yeah, you could talk about what it does there. That's like one paragraph, right? With well, what's it doing to the environment? But also like think about who you're trying to persuade here. Then there's the guy who they don't care. Animals are animals. We've been doing this. So there's really dumb arguments of we've been doing this forever. That's an appeal to tradition. If there's nothing behind why we've been doing it forever, like if someone makes the argument that we can't get the nutrition we need without it, well, then that's an argument that you should definitely address, right? Can we? Is there a viable way while also making sure that the food is healthy that we're eating? Like if it's that weird tofu chorizo stuff that like how processed is that? Like, sure, it might have the protein, but does it have all the other, like, is it really something that we can trust in the long run with that much processing? We know that all the other processed foods that we eat are pretty much garbage. So maybe that's just when we try to turn vegetarian things into things that we remember that are meat, like trying to have a non-dairy, non-gluten, non-meat pizza, right? And so we do all these ridiculous things to make this thing that looks and kind of tastes like it. Maybe, I don't think it comes anything close, but then we'll act like that's healthier for us. So there's the factor of, can we do it in a healthier way? Because you do have an argument on your side for, well, the way that you're eating meat, is that healthy for you, right? Most of the people aren't eating grass-fed beef. Most people are eating beef and chicken that have been fed and treated like garbage their entire lives, you think that's healthy for you, right? And the meat, if you're eating, are you eating so more meat than you'd even need to eat? Like that's just going to be rotting in your gut, right? Why do you think your farts smell so bad? I don't know, but you can try and make sure that you're making arguments that will definitely persuade that kind of person, because there's multiple people that you're dealing with, which is good. Like that means you could almost like pick a different opposing viewpoint to address along the way at like different steps, which, you know, there's the super extreme person of like definitely just wanting to eat their meat because it's American to eat your meat or whatever. Don't deal with that argument, but deal with the other ones that they might make. But then there's people like, well, I want to eat a little bit of meat because I need the nutrition. So maybe like once a day or once a week or something like that, but I only want to eat it from cows and animals that have been treated well, humanely, and, you know, lived a happy life, and only ate healthy things, and then we ate them, right? There's that person's argument. Do you have something that you could say to even them to persuade them not to eat meat altogether? And what is remember, you got to think about the ideology that's behind why we do it, how we do it now, right? So what do you think's there, Alan?
I think it's because from when I really thought about it, and also, you know, I did some research on that. I think it's just because we've been eating meat since we were born. You know, we never thought about why we are eating meat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're so accustomed to this, you know. So
sure,
yeah, that's why, you know. But well, this actually the idea of stopping eating meat when I became a vegetarian myself. So before that, I never thought about why I shouldn't eat meat, you know. So
sure,
yeah.
But so there is the person who just eats meat because they never even thought of anything else, and they just like it because it tastes good, and so they haven't ever thought about the consequences of them, or the problems. So that person, you can imagine that person's going to be dealt with no matter what in your essay, just by simply informing them. What about if from that point someone is they are informed about stuff, but they still feel like they have the right to eat meat, or don't want to quit? What is the mentality there?
I think they maybe think because it tastes good, or because they need to get the nutrients from meat.
Sure, but why?
Or they're just in general are like, you know, meat eaters. You know, they.
But despite how we treat the animals, so you got to come up with something. This is one way how I make sure that people don't write essays that they've already written before. I throw in an element like this so that like they have to, like, people can try and plagiarize with my essays, but they can't really pull an essay that someone's already written or they already wrote earlier on. This element right here, the ideology that's attached to it, that thing needs to be in your essay, and it needs to be something that you're arguing. Like, that's the thing. Like, sure, you're addressing that there's an issue. Why is it such an issue that even when people know that animals are suffering and animals are sentient, like freaking cows and pigs are smart. They are smart animals. They can like love you. If you know anyone who accidentally got like a pig because they were like, oh, these little baby pigs that stay baby forever, potbelly pigs or something. My buddy, he ended up buying one time, or like someone gave it to him or whatever, and he thought it was just going to stay small. It turned out to be like a real big pig. It just died, and it like broke his heart because this pig was smart and loving and just like great companion. And like the only difference, like you said, Alan, we're so far removed from it. We don't see the slaughter. We don't see the conditions that they live in. And then we don't see how they actually have brains and feelings and things like that. I'm not saying that they're at the same level as humans, but there's definitely, like, when you see them in a natural habitat, if you can, as close as it can get, let's say free range animals where they're allowed to stay with their young and things like that, to see the way that they interact and all that stuff. So what is it you're dealing with here? So it's you're trying to persuade the person on the other side of those things we're just talking about here. So making them aware of that, but then also you're trying to talk about the mentality. So there is something that makes it so that we don't even think about it. It's something about being too far removed from it. Like imagine if everyone had to slaughter their own meat in order to have it.
Yeah.
How many people would eat meat still?
Right. So I can use that as the ideology behind this phenomenon, right?
Something about that. You need to pinpoint a little bit more. So a self-absorbed kind of aspect to it, or out of sight, out of mind, but it's like almost intentional. Like anytime someone might bring it up, like I've heard tons of friends who I try to bring up the most controversial, like not enjoyable topics to talk about. Somehow, every time I hang out with people, like it just happens. I'll bring up like Nazis or rape or something horrible. And like, I'm not suggesting you guys do this stuff, but I think I'm broken. I'm a little broken. But whenever I do bring up something like that, like animals, people immediately are like, oh, I don't want to hear about that. Like, oh, like they already know about it, but they don't want to think about it. Some of those people are vegetarians, but a lot of those people love their hot dogs and their hamburgers and their steaks and their baby back ribs, and they don't want to think about it because they want to keep those things. So that's a willful ignorance kind of thing that is rooted in some kind of ideology, belief, mentality, something where they are able to justify not thinking about it and not dealing with it. You're on the right track for sure there, but I'd say like try to find something you could say, whether it's a selfishness or self-absorbed thing or whatever. Okay,
and that will be strong enough for the reason of ideology behind this.
Yeah, I think so.
Thing, right? Okay,
but you have to walk through your essay with it. Like, don't just drop it in the introduction and then like never bring it up again. Try to make your argument around showing it at different steps of like what's going on, right? Because it's all over the place. Jose, do you have some more ideas on what you were wanting to go over?
I understand more. What is the thing I have to do? It's not like just get a social problem and like broad thing, but get more into specifics on how that is wrong.
So rather than just saying racism in general, you'd need to find an aspect where people are not being treated properly, and you can pin it on racism or why that might be persisting. It could go back to the way that people live in self-inflicted segregation, like we talked about before. What's behind that? See how that you can attach a mentality to that. See with the racism thing, what's behind the racism still? Yes, it results in something that's clearly in that category, but then is there something that is at the root of why people do that? Have you noticed that people tend to be more racist towards the people that they live next to? Like anytime you see someone who is of that ethnicity doing something that you don't like, then you pin it on their ethnicity, as opposed to just saying there's a person doing a thing that I don't like, and then it keeps like reinforcing something about that ethnicity when you're like, white people do that too. Mexicans do that too, right?
Yeah, I've seen it. That's what I said, like stereotypes of people pinpointing certain actions to certain ethnicities and just saying, oh, that kind of people always does that and stuff like that.
Right. So when you do it though, make sure you can focus on like a specific thing that's going on in society that is in the category of racism, but it has to be something tangible so that you can connect it. Otherwise it's going to hurt you. Like I'm only saying it to make sure you don't get stuck, because you'll be like, oh, I feel like I wrote this paragraph already. It's because you'll be writing on a general concept as opposed to attaching this concept to something that you can handle for a whole essay, and keep pointing to components of that one thing.
Yeah, I understand. So I have a question. In case I go with the racism thing,
Mm-hmm.
do you have to then select like a specific race to write about?
See, that would depend on the thing that you pick. Maybe it's something that's only really happening with Asians, or only really happening with, there's a conflict between Tongan and Samoans. So like they're both Polynesian, but for some reason there's like almost like gang wars that happen. I had a student who he was shot. He's Tongan, and he got shot by Samoans, just like rolling through somewhere like I think Long Beach or something like that. And I was like, what? I had no idea, but like, why is there a conflict between them, and what's behind that conflict? See, now you can focus in on something a lot better, as opposed to then just like hitting up this abstract thing where you've got some really good points, but you end up kind of fizzling out after 3 paragraphs. So like, make sure you can find one thing, and definitely make it be something that you, so maybe it's hypermasculinity within the Latino community or whatever. I mean, it's everywhere. It's in every community, but you could talk about the aspect that's going on there if you know more about it or whatever. I know that's not a race problem. It's more like a gender or yeah. See, so like, what is it about how we define men that makes it so that men end up growing up thinking they just need to like fuck bitches and make money?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's weird, right? Is that what makes you a man? If that's what makes you a man, then men are horrible. If that's the ideal man, then the ideal man is a piece of garbage, right? That can't be the ideal man. And where do we get that? So there's things that you could do for topics, like, and this is for anyone, definitely pick something that you could definitely write on and you're interested in going over and that you can find good material on. All right, so here's some topics. You could talk about guns, recreational drugs and stimulants, psychological medicines, why we take medicines for mental illnesses that don't necessarily need a chemical balance change. It's like you're trying to mow the weeds thing, right? The weeds are just going to keep coming back. You're not getting rid of the problem there. What's behind that? We just want an easy fix. What's that related to? See how there's something you could do with that. Environment. See, you got to get specific when you talk about environment, because it's really not going to be an environment thing. It's going to be more like the thing that we're doing that ends up causing the environmental issue that then you can touch on, like Alan, which you could at least have one paragraph where you talk on whatever, it's the methane, or I mean, when we just even clear forests so that we can have cattle and livestock on those forests, that destroys the land too, because the forests are holding the soil in place. So there's a lot more to it than just it causing warming with their farts. There's so much more. There's places in the Amazon, and Madagascar is being destroyed just by wiping out their trees. And so one of the huge things that they do with making places for cattle is, cutting down a bunch of trees. You can sell all that wood, but the wood's, it's done. That forest isn't coming back. And especially when you pretty much trash it and turn it to a cesspool of cow shit, then it's not fertilizer anymore when it's like 6 feet deep of cow shit. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have a question for guns. Can we talk about, like, people want to ban guns in the United States, like not make it available for the public?
So yeah, is the gun the problem, or is it something that's taught about it and the way that you could just take someone's life, or what's important to, it's about protecting what's mine over someone else at the cost of someone's life. There's a lot that goes there. Do you guys have any thoughts on guns? Why do we feel like we need to keep our guns?
People say to protect themselves and the people they care about. The guns topic, it seems interesting to me. However, I don't know how to find if it's a social problem compared to breeding dogs.
you're saying the dogs one you could get a lot more out of.
Yeah.
So guns is tricky. I would say guns if you're really into it. And especially I feel like the person who would write on guns would be someone who's actually for guns. I feel like they could get a lot more out of that one, because then you're not going to get caught on the very simple component of we just need to get rid of guns. Like,
Yeah.
is that really the answer? Do you really have to get rid of guns? Because there's ways to lock them up, and there's ways to just, like, you can have a gun and then not use it. There's that. Or you can use a gun for hunting. There's that too, right? So, I mean, now, do you need to hunt? Some people they hunt for their food, and then we're going back to Alan's thing, right? My mom used to live in New Mexico at 10,000 feet, so there's elk everywhere. It's not like rock gardens and people's lawns. This is the mountains where there's snow and there's amazing trees and stuff. And people would hunt elk, and they'd be able to put that in their freezer and be able to eat that all year long. And so not only is it healthier meat, that animal was having a great life until it got shot. There is etiquette, and there's ethics on how to kill that animal, making sure that you kill it as cleanly as possible so that it doesn't suffer. That's an ideal. That's something that you're going for. There's that kind of thing. You're eating healthy, and it's something you take and you utilize all of it too. So it's not you're not wasting a lot. So there's arguments there from that standpoint. Remember, you want to be well-rounded with your arguments. So if you feel like that's the kind of opposition that comes up that someone might say to something you're talking about, you can bring that up, but you could also say, yeah, but how many people are doing that? How many people who eat meat are killing their own meat like that? And then when they do that, is it just like a novelty? Like, we're having elk burgers tonight, and then they're not eating it the rest of the year, or that's like really a smaller amount of the meat they're eating. When it comes down to guns, likewise. How many people use their guns to hunt, right? People call it an assault rifle. It's just, you don't need to nitpick on that argument. Anything this is an assault pin, if I want it to be, right? I don't think I could get very far with this, but the idea is what you're doing with the thing and what you would potentially do with it if the need arose. So for protection, that's another huge element to it. You're not hunting with a handgun, that's for sure. The thing is, most crimes are happening with handguns, but then also people protecting their houses. I had, we have break-ins, especially during our time right now. There have been break-ins all over my neighborhood, just within blocks away, multiple break-ins. It was a thing that was happening, especially during the fires. And what do you do there? Like, should you not have a gun to protect yourself? Because a couple guys got shot by another dude who they were breaking into his house, and the guy straight up killed one of them and injured the other. But how did he do it? Was it a defensive thing? So like, what is our mentality? Do we own the gun because we are itching to use it on someone? Do we go to the shooting range and we're just like, we go to the shooting range with our dog that has its nuts still, and we're like, really into guns, and anytime we can, we'll bring out our gun and show it to people and post it on Instagram and be like, talking about their gun like their penis or something, or like it's an extension. Is it that? Because it doesn't have to be that either. You can own a gun and you could even be having it for protection and still not use it. You could, if someone goes to enter your house, you could have an unloaded shotgun that you cock. And when someone hears that someone just cocked a shotgun, they leave. It could be a deterrent, a visual deterrent, a How about this? You have a shotgun that's filled with BBs that will just hurt someone really bad, but not kill them. Or you could put buckshot in it and shoot them in the knees. So there's so many things that you could do with that. That isn't just like what is the mentality and how far do you have to go with it? So whoever does guns should probably be someone who's like on board with having guns. But maybe, if you're not on board with having guns, you still need to address, and you want to go over guns, you need to address those things.
Yeah,
especially
that side. Yeah, I see it now. And yeah, you're right. It should be someone who is pro guns.
I told you I'm a libertarian, right? I'm pro Constitution, so I am pro guns. I just don't think that we should use them. I'm also a pure pacifist because I'm a Christian. So there are Christians. So we talk about ideology. Okay, so you don't have to do this, but if you want, at the beginning of your essay, put it in its own little thing and then do 1 or 2 spaces in between. You can put what I call a prolegomena, which is just a fancy Greek word for before I speak. Just call it a preface or prologue or something, where you can go over what you actually believe, which is basically your criteria for this. And then you can, in your essay, just not really say what you really believe, but talk about that criteria that someone else would go with, right? If obviously I'm a Christian and I know that the person that I'm arguing with is not going to be a Christian, or they're going to be one of those asshole Christians. Well, I mean, I'm an asshole Christian too, but I feel like I'm a different kind of asshole. Anyway, the person that's on the other side, I know that they're not going to take the criteria that I am working with for why I feel so passionately about this, but I can still find criteria that they could get on board with to try and persuade them. So knowing your reader, who you're trying to persuade, and making sure that your criteria fits with them. But if you want at the beginning, if you're like, no, I just need to get this off my chest so it makes sense, you can throw this at the beginning. It'll give a little bit of space to your essay too, I'm sure. So that might be why some people want to do it, but I would suggest at least doing this for yourself, and then you can choose not to put it in your essay, or you can, it's up to you, but that could be useful. So when I'm talking about my belief, as a Christian, I have criteria. This is something that's going to affect the way that I argue it. Guns, I think that we should have them. I don't think we should use them, at least on each other. I am a pure pacifist based off of what I believe from the Bible. Jesus is a pacifist. He says, turn the other cheek. That is directly related to the law of God. Our battle is not against flesh and blood. So whatever we fight, it's a spiritual battle. And the way that we fight is we suffer for other people. We love people by having patience with them and suffering. And through that suffering, we can win people over. But if we think, no, I'm going to hold on to my guns, they're going to have to peel them from my cold, dead hands, that doesn't sound like what Jesus talks about. So it's weird when I hear Christians talk like that. And so maybe I would even make an argument of that. I would try focusing on making my whole argument about the mentality or ideology that's flawed in Christians who love their guns. I could make a whole essay about that. And you could totally do that too. You could focus on a religious or a political stance that holds on to something, like a mentality found in there. And that's specific enough to get a really cool essay out of, because then I can bring up things that Christians would try to bring up in the Bible. Well, Jesus said, get a sword, right? He said, sell your cloak and get a sword. There's this part where he says that. It's the last night before he gets taken to be crucified. He tells Peter, they're like, well, we have 2 swords. And he says, yeah, that's enough. So they have swords, and they go to the Garden of Gethsemane and they pray. And then during that time, Jesus knows what's going to happen, right? He's praying there. He's waiting to be taken away. The chief priests, the guys who are out to get him, them and their guards, they come to take him. And what does Peter do? He pulls out the sword and he whacks this guy's ear off. He's trying to kill someone. He's not just like, I'm just going for the ear here. It's not like I'm just shooting him in the kneecap thing. No, he's He's aiming at his head. He's a fisherman. He's aiming at the guy's head. He only gets his ear. Jesus says, stop, what are you doing? He told them to get swords, but he didn't tell them to use the swords for that purpose. And so he cuts off the dude's ear. He says, put down the sword, Peter. What are you doing? If I wanted, I could call down angels and they would wreck these dudes. When they actually ask which one's Jesus, they're like, who's Jesus here? Because Jesus doesn't look like some blonde, blue-eyed guy who like levitates and glows. Like, that's not what Jesus looks like. He looks like he's a carpenter, or he's actually a stone worker, because they didn't have trees in Israel. So he's probably like this short, dark guy who's in the sun all the time, probably short, scraggly, messy hair, and like a honking nose, and like he just looks like everyone else. Not good looking, probably. They have to ask who he is among the bunch of them, because he just looks like everyone else. When Jesus says, he says, I am, they all fall backwards, it says in the text. So like, I think if Jesus can halt people with just his words like that, I don't think he needs a sword there. So like, the reason why he got the sword, this is interesting. He tells him to get a sword. He knows what Peter's going to do with it, though he doesn't tell him to do it. And then once Peter does it, he says, stop, what are you doing? Then he heals the guy's ear. This guy, he's in the service of the priests. So that means he has to be, there's regulations in the Old Testament. You can't be sick, can't have any impurities or imperfections about you. And it's all symbolism. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't make you a lesser person if you're like handicapped or something. It's just symbolic. Like when they'd wash and have to do all these ceremonies just to enter the temple. It's not that like God cares about you smelling like BO or something. It's symbolic of being clean in his presence and things like that. But that's all the point to Jesus. That's a side thing. The whole point here is this guy, once he gets his ear cut off, even though it didn't kill him, right? He can still survive through life without that. And yet that guy would never be able to do his job again, because that would disqualify him having his ear removed. So Jesus, at the time where most people would be thinking about themselves and fleeing and like, oh, woe is me, I'm going to go get crucified, because he knows what's going to happen. He's talked about it a bunch and people didn't understand what he was saying. He decides to do another miracle, his last miracle, where he straight up like heals the guy's ear. So he goes and nullifies what Peter did. He pretty much allowed Peter to do that so that he could heal someone and love someone in a situation where they were leading him to death. That's why there's the sword. That's why we can have guns, but we shouldn't use them. So now let me give you an application of that. As a Christian, someone breaks into my home. I have a gun for protection. Let's say I'm single here. What would be more powerful or more compelling as a witness for Jesus, do you think? Would it be to shoot the guy because I'm in the right? He's coming into my home. He's not retreating, or whatever stipulations you might want to talk about with that. I can shoot him. I'm well within my right. Or I have the gun and I choose not to use it. Or how about this? I have a gun and I choose not to use it, or I don't have a gun at all. Let's say I'm confronting the guy. The possibility for grace or for loving someone is higher when you have the gun and choose not to use it than if you didn't have it at all. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because you have the option if you have the gun, like you choose not to do it instead of not even having an option.
Boom, there you go. You see it. Yeah, you had the option. It wasn't like, well, you didn't have a gun to begin with, so it doesn't matter. It's like, no, I do have a gun, and then I still didn't use it because I want to preach. Other people might be like, I'll shoot him in the kneecaps and then I'll tell him about Jesus while he's bleeding out on my carpet. And then you can see what's the mentality there. It's like, I think you just wanted to shoot someone. If you can avoid shooting them, because then there's a problem for the Christian here. You lose your own life. That's one thing. What happens if you do have a family? What happens if you have kids? You are called to protect them. So then it gets more complicated for that person's argument, where someone's breaking into your home. Do you just say, Jesus loves you and I'm not going to shoot you? And then they're like, okay, let me see your gun. And then they hit you and then they rape and kill your family. I mean, what kind of scenario is that? I was a piece of crap back in the day in high school, and I'm not saying I did steal things, but I would say that I know about stealing things. And I can say, at least from the mentality that I had back then, I would never go into someone's house if I knew they were there. Are you trying to get away with stealing? Or are you trying to get caught, the consequence being going to prison? You ended up having to murder someone because you walked in the house when there were people there and stuff like that. You didn't get away with something. I mean, you can't just roll into people's houses on accident and be like, oh, I guess I got to kill them and now I can get away with it for like 40 years and then die in peace. It's like, no, people have Ring cameras, and if they don't catch you on this block, someone's camera is going to catch you on this other block. And it's not worth it for a criminal if they know someone is there. But then my wife might say, yeah, but a lot of people who are criminals are crazy and they don't have the same common sense or rationalization of thinking about consequences. But if I do this now, the chances of me getting away with it are less likely. She would argue that some people are just trying to steal or break in because something else that's going on in their heads. I don't know. Maybe you could find statistics on people who steal. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that you could look through, data that people have taken from interviewing criminals in prison and stuff like that. Criminals also lie a lot. So it's hard to work with a lot of that data. You got to take it for what it is. Right? Everyone lies, though, I would say. Everyone lies even when they say what they did something for, right? When someone shoots someone for entering their home and acting like they had no other option, well, they're trying to justify that to themselves because they killed someone and they have to live with it now. So, I mean, even if you're taking someone else, like a single person's anecdotal situation there where that's what happened to them, it's hard to trust what they're saying when they can't even trust what they're saying because they're trying to make themselves feel better about something they had to do or did and maybe didn't have to do. So you don't know. There's too many variables for some of that stuff. See how you can get an essay out of that now? And if you pick something that is closer to your beliefs, then you can really go into details on it and pick apart the problems that might really irk you in what you already know.
Yeah, I get that. It's easier if you're like passionate or know about a topic. At the same time, like you said, if you're against a topic, you can write that you don't agree with what you're writing and choose not to put that on your essay.
You definitely want to know what you believe about the thing and why you believe it, but you don't necessarily have to put that on your essay. So the reason why I say set it apart, because especially if you do it for your rough draft, your reader might be able to help you. Okay, so you're intending to not necessarily put it into your essay itself because you don't want someone to judge you based on what you believe. Oh, you're just a Christian, or you're just a Muslim, or you're just a liberal snowflake or something like that. You don't want to get them to throw up those walls that they might if they know that stuff firsthand. However, in your rough draft, maybe if you put that at the top before everything, including your thesis, right? And just say like, this is that preface bit, just have that titled and then move on after that. Then maybe your reader who will go over it, they'll be like, oh, you know what? There are some other arguments that you could be able to make here if that's what you believe. Or they could say, this is the most important part. They could say, you know what? I think the stuff that you believe is coming through a little bit stronger here. You need to find different criteria because that might be the criteria you use, but this person's not going to agree with that. So it might help your reader or the person who's peer reviewing your essay, help them help you be sure to be a little bit more objective in your writing, because you might think you're doing it well, but they'll be like, no, you're slipping a little bit in this spot. I can see this coming through a little bit down here that you might not want that to, because it'll turn off whoever you're trying to argue against or something like that. You can see how that would be helpful. So there's that, but definitely want to know what you believe about it and how you can work through it. You can write your essay with full cards on the table, because so like I said, if you're a Christian and you're against guns like me, if you have something like that going on and there's a bunch of people on the other side of it, you could write your whole essay from that perspective, and it's just to other Christians or it's just to other vegetarians, right? Alan, maybe you're like, I'm just straight vegan, and I'd argue against even people who eat eggs and fish and the pesca-ovitarian, whatever. Maybe you want to focus your argument on that too. Or maybe you're okay with eggs and you want to make your argument about vegetarian for sure as much as you can, but eggs are okay so long as those chickens are happy, right? You're not killing them. They're not even fertilized eggs. It's a chicken period, which might make people not want to eat eggs also if you call it that. So don't call it that, because that's what eggs are. I eat eggs, by the way. They're good. I eat really good eggs. We talked about how there's higher quality eggs. The chickens are happy, as far as I know. I buy them and it says that they're happy on the box, and I'm trusting them. Is that because I'm trying to just remove it? Do I go so far as being the people on Portlandia where they're like, what farm did this chicken come from? I'm going to go and check that farm out and make sure these chickens are really happy. Do that too. It might take way too much of your life, or you could have relationships with the people that you buy stuff from. You see how the narrower you can go on something like that in a field, the more depth, the more nuance you can get to the arguments that you're making, which could give you more of an essay with less work. That's the way that I look at it, but you can do whatever you want with it. Well, to an extent.
Yeah, that's like how the essay, you're not doing a broad topic, you're more concentrating on something in a specific, right?
Yeah, by focusing on the specific thing, then you can really focus on the mentality and the intricacies of that where you can flesh out how the mentality is definitely, or the ideology causes the situation to go the way that it does. There's some other fun stuff, though, that you could go over that's pretty big right now. What about vaccines? Is there a problem with people who don't want to take them? Or is there a problem with people who want to force them? You could even go into like texting while driving. People are still doing it. It's still illegal. What is the mentality behind that? Every time I go on the road and I look around me, every person I see in their car is like this on their phone. Or every time someone's not doing something right and it's affecting me, like let's say they're not going at a light, or let's say they're running a stop sign and I'm almost getting T-boned by them or whatever, or vice versa. I'm almost T-boning them because they keep going and it's my right of way. Every time something like that happens, it's because someone's staring at their screen. Like, what makes someone do that? Some people leave their phone up in their dash, either on this side or that side, or even have it mounted right in front of their steering wheel and it's sideways. Do they watch TV shows while they are driving? Like they are the driver. It's not your kids watching something on a screen that pops down from the back or an iPad that you slip in the back of the seat. They are straight up watching TV shows, catching up on TV shows while they do their commute, while they drive, weaving through like freeway traffic. Like I've totally seen this. Why is that acceptable, and what is going on in their head? Because it's a pretty common thing. Like it's not just like that's just an outlier, that's just the one dude. It's like, no, it's everyone I see when I'm driving is doing something like that. So my biggest standard, what influences my criteria and every little detail of what I think on something is first going to be the Bible. And then because it matches up with the Bible is going to be my political stance of libertarianism, which does fluctuate. Sometimes it's more libertarian, sometimes it's less, based off of how that works with Christianity. Like how I feel about the abortion issue. Well, libertarians will tend to be for abortion because people have rights, but I would argue that human life, being a human, like it's a weird thing to say that someone has like rights as a human, to have to argue that when you, because it's clearly life. Like once it starts replicating cells and having a heartbeat and all that, it's clearly life. So that's not an argument. The argument is people are free to do anything they want so long as it doesn't hurt another person. I would say that is a person, right? And other people would say that's not a person yet. It's not a person until they pop out of the womb. Well, so that's how that changes my criteria, even though I say I'm a libertarian. So there's things that are important to me with this. When I'm thinking about mentality and what I think is the root behind something, it might not be what you think is the root behind it, right? I think that people are born being prone to, so they're either prone, they're all of these. They're prone to it, they're born in it, they are innately vested with selfishness, which I could call selfishness for people who don't believe the Bible. And for people who do believe the Bible, I would call that sin nature, right? We are innately sinful. We are innately selfish. Our drives are for survival, which happens to be selfish. So anything we do, we're thinking about ourself first. we already talked about that with babies, right? It's not necessarily as sinful because they're not aware of what they're doing. It's just self-preservation or being discomforted, but it grows as we grow and mature and start realizing more and more about the world around us. That's where it really then becomes sin, when we're like, I'm going to do this thing for myself anyway, even despite what it does to another person. So you see how what my standard says about it is influencing how I look at the problems and the ideologies that then becomes something that I can point to with this essay. So if that's the case, if people are born that way, that means the answer of right and wrong, good and bad, it's not going to necessarily be in them. In fact, it probably isn't, because what we will say is right or wrong, we'll justify things, we'll vindicate ourselves. Remember, I've said before that we tend to make ourselves either the hero or the victim in a scenario, and rarely will we make ourselves the villain. We won't do that, because that doesn't feel good. That's not comfortable. We try to justify ourselves so that we can remove guilt. In fact, that's the purpose of psychology, to remove guilt, if you didn't know that. And I feel like that's a little silly when, for me, thinking about it, you need to accept the guilt so that you can actually improve yourself, rather than just trying to make yourself feel better about things. You actually want to improve yourself. That's a secular way of saying it. The biblical way of saying it would be to grow more into the image of Christ. He is making you more into being like him as you walk in him. So if it doesn't come from within them, then that means they need to be taught externally. They need to be taught by other people what is right or wrong, good or bad. People need to be willing to be taught. That's really important. So you can't just like force people. As kids, you can kind of force them. First, they trust you because you're feeding them and clothing them, and they don't know anything else, and they're expecting you to have the answers. But at a certain point, you can't force people to believe things about good or bad or right or wrong. You have to convince them. They have to be willing to accept it, to understand it. So you can't beat it into them, right? And then I also believe that people will most likely not choose what is good or right over what is comfortable. Like, even if they know it, they still want the comfort. They still want the things that make them feel good. Why do you think people are stuck on their phones? Like, they would rather choose to feel good and get all those brain chemicals that they're getting from swiping through things and getting likes, or getting adrenaline rushes from living vicariously through a screen of someone base jumping and flying through mountain trees, watching porn instead of having relationships with people. I think you get it. So like, this changes the way that I have to argue with someone, as well as what I think the alternative is. Do we need regulation to change? If I were to talk to you about like texting while driving, do we need, like, how would we even fix that in a regulatory way? Would we have to turn every car into a Faraday cage where once you get in it, your phone does not work unless you plug it into the car, and then that gives you access to Wi-Fi or satellite, whatever, from outside the car. But once it's plugged in, it deactivates your phone screen and makes it so you can only work through what's on the car. And that has guidelines as to what you can and can't do, so that you can't just like stare at it and watch things. You can only get navigation or play music or something like that through it, or phone calls. Maybe that would be something that you would have to do, like put into place with laws. But what about people with old cars? And what about the cost of having to do that to a car? I mean, I don't even know how you'd build a Faraday cage in a car. I feel like a car is well, they're mostly plastic now. But you see how there's all that ridiculousness of like, are you joking me? You build your car into a Faraday cage and go through all those ridiculous steps, and how much that would cost, and how people would just find hacks around it, and they just load some like, third-party software on their phone so that it doesn't have to actually, once you plug it in, or you bootleg it into your car, people will always find a way around that stuff. Yeah, so a lot of problems there. Here, you're just better to focus on mentality.
So I have a question. So if a person wants to write about that topic,
Mm-hmm.
they will write for like what solution they can give or something like that. I mean, that's one part of the topic of the essay.
Yeah, and I'm asking you for an ideology that would fix it. So is there something that you could persuade them of, like with Alan's, about the way to look at animals or the way to look at the world? So flipping it back to mine with my ideology of being a Christian and the other Christians that I see. So with the environment, I don't think I ever really looked at the environment as something that I could just trash. Hey, it's all going to burn anyway. But I know a lot of Christians who have said that and they litter, right? They just like throw crap on the ground. They're like, hey, it's all going to burn anyway. And then that's their argument. So why fix it? Jesus is going to come back and fix everything. So my argument now, I have so many arguments against that thing right there. Let me ask you a question. If the Bible is real, Genesis and everything like that, we were in the garden, what was the first job in the world? A lot of people point to prostitution as being the first job in the world. There was a job. But if the Bible's true, the first job was not prostitution. What was the first job?
Gardening?
Yes, you're right, Jose. The first job was gardening. God said, tend the garden, take care of the garden, take care of all this life. He has man go through the animals and even name them, right? He's supposed to have a relationship. So he has a relationship with God, and then he is supposed to also, as God's caretaker for the planet, take care of this place. Does that mean trash it?
No.
Does that mean use it for your own, like, just feeling good? Like, you know what? I just feel like having a steak tonight. I just feel like eating a 20-ounce steak. No one needs that. Do you know you can only like process like 30 grams of protein every 2 hours? And that's like extreme. If you're getting 30 grams of protein every 2 hours, you're going to be farting a lot. You're going to have gut rot too. Like, you don't need that much protein in a day. See, Alan, I'm writing your essay for you. Like, these are arguments that could be made here, because there are Christians that say, no, we were given dominion over the planet to do with it as we see fit. That means eat the animals. That means trash the place however we want, deal with it however we want. This is a present for us. I don't know if I said it in this class. I posted a video, but I think it was on Instagram from one of the previous classes where I talked about rappers talking about the world is theirs. So the concept of like the world is mine, like I can just do with it whatever I want. I own it. Like, what does it mean? Because if God gave us the world in a way, how did he give it to us, and what did he give it to us for? He gave it to us to take care of. And when we take care of it, so this is a criteria that not many people would take, but the Christians would, which is he gave it to us to take care of as a form of worship. We show him that we love him by how we take care of. So it's this relationship with him that's happening in how we take care of the world around us. And that's how we treat our neighbor. I think I mentioned this before. If you give to your neighbor, if you give to the least of these, if you give someone a cup of cold water, if you help them with their groceries, you're doing it, you could be doing it to God as worship. Because whatever you do to your neighbor, to your brother, you're doing because of what he's done for you. So it says to the least of these, right? And how can you love him who you haven't seen if you aren't loving him who you do see, right? So I have the opportunity to love someone around me, my neighbor, my wife, my family member, my coworker. I don't really have the opportunity to love God like that, because he doesn't need that stuff. He doesn't need my money. He doesn't need me to clean out his gutters, right? You see what this is? We show our love to God by doing things with other people. And so that's something that I might not be able to argue with everyone, but I could apply that criteria in a way to people who would still be able to accept at least the mentality or the ideology of it. A lot of people try to say stuff like paying it forward. I think that that's like a diminished version of it, because then you're like sowing and reaping kind of thing, where you're like, well, I'm going to get something back. It ends up still being selfish.
Yeah, because paying it back is expecting something back,
right? It still shows a little bit of selfishness. You're working with the nature, or you're working with the faulty component of the way that you think. And while that might produce better results for something externally, it doesn't fix how you are inside. And that problem of selfishness will still manifest in some other aspect further down the road. Remember, like mowing the weeds, right? I'm just mowing my weeds. The lawn looks pretty from further away, because the weeds are down, but they're still there.
Yeah, it's impossible to stop the weeds from just coming back.
Yeah. So once again, if you guys do come up with stuff, because honestly, just Alan and Jose and Nicole earlier did the legwork for whoever else is watching this now. No one else really sent me questions. But if you do still have questions about your essay along the way, I'm going to be doing a bunch of grading this week. Next week is just, I'm going to show up here and I'm going to answer questions so that you can have like ammunition for the final, or like something to write with for the final if you didn't get enough through any of the other videos we had. But if you have questions during the week, feel free to ask me. I'll get back to you as soon as I can, which will probably be the same day unless you ask me late at night. But so long as they are specific questions, like about your thesis or paragraph claims or some kind of criteria that you're getting stuck with, like, oh, what is the mentality thing that is really going on here? I don't think I'm getting deep enough. Just so long as you're not asking me to read your whole draft, that'd be great. But I'd love to help you along the way there. Either show up to the office hour or message me. I'd love to give you some feedback on specific stuff like that. So there's that. You'll get your essay 3 feedback. That way you'll know these are the things I need to work on for essay 4. It's pretty important that you make sure that you fix the things, because once again, you're going to have opposing viewpoints in this essay because you're writing it for someone who would disagree with you. You're not writing it for the guy that agrees with you. What's the point in that? They already agree with you. So you're trying to answer the kinds of things that people who disagree with you would be saying. So yeah, you're going to have all the things that we've worked on in the past. When you bring in arguments, you're going to have reasoning because of value arguments with criteria here, but you're going to have arguments of fact along the way. And you're going to want to provide evidence like statistics, or these are the settings. These are the actual things that animals have to deal with in the majority of our meat industry. So anything like that, you want to point to hard facts so that you can persuade your reader with actual support for what you're saying. So how to know if you need to do revision. Remember, you have the option of revising one essay. You can't revise the 4th essay because you're turning it in. And you won't have time for me to give you feedback on that and then bring it back to me. There's no time for anything like that. So what you do have to work with is, if let's say you bombed essay 1, 2, or 3, like you didn't do very well on those, you can revise it. You can look at the feedback I've given you and you can fix those things to the best of your ability, and you can potentially get all the points back for that. So if you go down, you'll have week 16 is up here, and then you have revision, your optional revision. You don't have to do this. If let's say you didn't bomb it, or let's say your grade is already going to be like a low B, and even if you revise something, it's not enough points to really get you to an A, well then don't bother with it. Or maybe you're like, I really don't feel very confident with essay 4, and that is a deal breaker because of how many points it is. So I'm going to try and hedge my bets and get an extra 20 points on this essay that I missed out on 20 points for, because I know I can fix a couple of these things. My thesis wasn't clear enough, and I could build a couple more arguments to opposing viewpoints in essay 3 or something like that. If you want to do that, you're free to do that. You just click here and you submit it, but it has to be one of the first 3 essays. And so here's some instructions. When you do this, before you do any changes to your essay, you need to know how to track changes. You can either track changes, which is in Word. So if you use Word, Microsoft Word, then you would track changes, which there is a link to a video on how to do that in the same module as this. Or if you're using Google Docs, you would turn suggestions on. And so any edits you make to your essay would then look like suggestions, and you would save it like that and send it to me so I can see. And what it does is any new material that you add will be underlined. So I'll see that, oh, this is new material that you've done to change the essay, to add to it, because I said you didn't make any good opposing viewpoint arguments. So you add an entire paragraph or sections to paragraphs or whatever. And then you realize that, well, there were some bad arguments that you don't even need now because you added the ones that you really needed. And so if you cut that material or remove it altogether, whatever, then it'll cross it out. So you need to do that in either Word or Google Docs, but I need to be able to see the changes so that I can compare the essays and not like I'm already grading a bunch of stuff. So if you don't give me this where I can easily see the changes you've made, I'm not going to read it at all. You'll notice it says 0 points for this, but that's because what I'll do is I will go to your essay grade and I will add whatever points you got, like the things that you did to fix it. I will give you points up to the full grade that you could have got on the essay. So you could get a perfect score on it if you fix everything that I asked for. I'm only going to give you points, extra points for it, if you improve it. Some people in the past, sadly, only like 1 or 2 people did some revisions to it, but it made their essay worse. I'm not going to take away points if that happens, but I'm not going to give you more points if you didn't actually fix what I asked you for. Like, so some people will even just fix the grammar, but I told them they had way worse problems than grammar. Like the whole way that they were arguing their essay was wrong. So if they just fixed the grammar and I only took off like 4 points for grammar, I'm only going to give them 4 more points for fixing their grammar. But if they fix those bigger, more important issues in the essay, I'm going to give them the points that's what I marked them down for. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So right now, focus just on essay 4. Next class, there's going to be 2 things that happen there. I'm going to give you information that you might need to be able to answer the final, which, by the way, here are the instructions for the final. So you're just going to submit it here as a Word or PDF. So there's your instructions for it, but I'm going to talk to you for a while in class. So whoever needs more ammunition on me, I'm pretty much just going to sit there on the last day of class and talk to you about what I believe about stuff, like value arguments. You're going to find something you disagree with, or you agree, disagree, or both with. The thing is, if you're going to agree with me, you got to be able to add something. Don't just be like, I agree. So anytime people agree, it's easier to disagree, right? If you find something that you disagree on, you're more likely to do better in building good arguments. You'll have pretty much the rest of the day and then the next day to be able to write it and send it to me. And it's just going to be 500 words, kind of like a reading response.